Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. Today is a technical introduction to Defender for Cloud Apps, which is the CASB solution from Microsoft. So let's just first start with a bit of an agenda. We're going to start off with a bit of an overview of the features of Defender for Cloud Apps and its licensing. And then we'll hop into a demo to demonstrate some of the configuration set up, what it looks like, how it's used, that kind of thing. So first off, what is Defender for Cloud Apps? Defender for Cloud Apps is a cloud access security broker solution from Microsoft, a CASB. CASBs allow you to monitor and understand the overall posture of your cloud environment. This can be things such as discovering apps your users are using, shadow IT, assessing the compliance of apps. You can ensure sensitive information is protected regardless of app, third-party apps, and a lot more. CASBs essentially act as a gatekeeper to broker access between your users and the services that they're using in real time, regardless of the device and regardless of your user's location. Now, Defender for Cloud Apps is licensed in a few ways. There is an individual per user license as a standalone. You'll also find it included in EMS E5 and E5 Security, E5 Compliance, as well as M365 E5. So there's a lot of options to license this product. So let's touch on some of the main features that the solution provides you. So first off is discovering and controlling shadow IT. Defender for Cloud Apps will allow you to discover the cloud applications, SaaS, IaaS and PaaS services that are being accessed and utilized by your users. You'll then be able to investigate the usage patterns of these services, assess them for any potential risks, or even prevent your users from accessing them in the first place. The next part is protecting sensitive information in the cloud, anywhere in the cloud. So this allows you to protect against sensitive data being exposed in third-party applications and allows you to classify that data and protect it by applying real-time controls. So instead of just having, say, sensitive information protection for Office 365, you'd also be able to apply those protections in, say, Box, Dropbox or Google. So it's a true multi-cloud solution and allows us to have a much further reach than just Microsoft. Next is protecting against cyber threats and anomalies. So your cloud apps bring an abundance of log data when they're being used, and it's quite a lot to sift through manually. So what Defender for Cloud Apps will help you and support you do is monitor these applications and services for potential suspicious activity or even attacks themselves. And then we can apply controls in real time in response to those activities automatically. And then finally is assessing compliance of our cloud apps. So through log data that will be collected from an appliance such as a firewall or even our own devices, we can gain a lot greater visibility into the apps that are being used by our users. And we can begin to assess them against compliance standards relevant to our organization. This allows us to prevent potentially non-compliant apps from being used in our organization and unsanction them for user use in the first place. So it does quite a few things, but generally speaking, it's a multi-cloud solution that allows us to protect sensitive information, monitor user activities, and protect against attacks through our cloud apps. So that's been a bit of an overview. Just kind of touch on the main features. What we're now going to do is hop into a bit of a demo. Now, this demo isn't going to go through every single small detail. The intention of this demo in this webinar in general is to give you an overview of what the product is, what it looks like, and how you can use it, and then see if that's a solution that suits your business and potentially for your customers as well. So with that said, we'll hop into the portal now and go through a demo. So this is the Defender for Cloud Apps portal. Now this is accessed through portal.cloudappsecurity, which you can see up here. This product was previously named Cloud App Security, so you might recognize the name and have known this product previously. It had a rename from Microsoft, so it's now Defender for Cloud Apps. However, the portal has remained the same, portal.cloudappsecurity. Now the first thing we'll see is a bit of an overview, a bit of a dashboard, so any alerts we have, some insights, discovered apps, top users to investigate, these kind of things. But what we'll do is we'll actually dig through each of the elements of this portal here and what it looks like and how we can use this for our organization. So if we go to Discover, this is where we'll start looking at discovering shadow IT, looking at the applications our users are using and deciding if we want to allow them to continue using those applications and also setting them for compliance. So we go straight up to the Cloud Discovery dashboard. We get about a dashboard of apps that have been discovered. Now, to a preload to this, before I start digging through this is relying on log data. Now that log data can come from a variety of sources. And we can see up here the reports I've got running, these continuous reports that represent log data. First of all, I've got Windows 10 endpoint users. This is because Defender for Cloud Apps will seamlessly integrate with Defender for Endpoint. So if you're using Defender for Endpoint and Defender for Cloud Apps, the log data from those endpoints will be automatically sent to this service. Additionally, you can automatically ban and block applications from being used on those endpoints. Now, if you don't have Defender for Endpoint, what we'll need to do is to have some log data that we can upload. Now, what we can do first, on an ad hoc basis, is create a snapshot report. Now, a snapshot report it's not automatic, it won't be continuously updated, it's literally a case of us updating a snapshot of our logs on an ad hoc basis to get a bit of visibility into the applications and services that are being used at any given moment. So we could press next, we can name the report, the description, and we can see the source here being the appliance. So this is going to be firewall services and various other appliances that we can use as a source for this log data. So you can see here there's Cisco, there's Content Keeper, Fortinet, etc., Juniper, McAfee. So there's quite a few different sources we can use for the logs for the service to use to identify shadow IT and what our users are doing in terms of log data. Now, that might not be the most ideal method. So what we could instead do is have a continuous report, which could be based on automatic data. So we can set up log collectors in terms of data sources. So what we would do here is we'd first, in the settings here, under automatic log upload, is create a data source. That data source will be the appliance that we've looked at previously. And the receiver type, so the type of log, is it FTP, syslog, TLS, TCP, etc. And we can optionally anonymize private information. And what we then do is deploy a log collector on our on-premises environment and then connect that to that data source. So if I go to add log collector here, I put the name, IP or fully qualified domain name, and the data source, and then we'd set that up on premises. And it's a bit more complex for us to just demonstrate today, but that's how you would go about automatically uploading log data if you're not using Defender for Endpoint. Which that Defender for Endpoint integration is pretty easy to set up because it's just under here, Defender for Endpoint, and we can enable that integration to enforce app access. And additionally, the log data will be automatically sent anyway. But that's getting a bit ahead of ourselves. So if we go back to Cloud Discovery, let's look at what it looks like when we have some log data uploaded that we can investigate. So on the dashboard, we get a bit of an overview. How many discovered apps, how many discovered IP addresses, users, devices, etc. And a bit of a summary of the traffic in terms of megabytes or kilobytes. We can see the different app categories discovered, so security apps, IT services, collaboration. We can filter this by traffic, IP addresses, users, to get an idea of what our environment looks like in terms of the applications being used, how many users, how much traffic, etc. A bit of the risk level, so it will assess these applications for risk, and we can get a bit of an insight into that risk across all the applications that have been discovered. And then, of course, we can look at the discovered apps. Now this is just a dashboard. So what we really want to do is click into these discovered apps here, and we can see a list of the discovered applications. So in this case, this is a demonstration environment. We've mainly got Microsoft stuff here. We've got MSN, we've got Live, we've got Skype, online services, but we do have this one here, Akamai, if I'm pronouncing that right. And we're not sure of this, we've not seen it before. So what I might want to do is quickly click onto this and get some high-level detail. So I can get a bit of a summary of the app, what it is, some general security and risk disclaimers, so its category security, when was it founded, its headquarters, the data center, those kind of things. But what I might also want to do is actually assess this for potentially security and compliance risks. So security risks here being, does it have an admin audit trail? Does it remember passwords? Does it have user role support, data audit trail? Does it have penetration testing? So we can begin to assess this application to see how up to date and how secure is it? Is it something we maybe want our users using, or is this maybe not secure enough for us? Likewise, we can do the exact same with compliance and legal. So with compliance, you can see the various compliance regulations and industry standards. We've got SOC 2, HIPAA, ISO, and various others, and as well some legal obligations such as GDPR. Does it report data breaches? Or GDPR, does it have data protection? That kind of thing. Now what I can do is I can actually click into this application to get a bit more insight and a bit more detail. So the app score is 7, so it scores it out of 10. 7, not too bad, but it's not too great either. And we can see specifically how this is being scored here with the Cloud App Score. So the general is 10 out of 10, security 6 out of 10, legal 8 out of 10. And we can further go to the score breakdown again, like we've seen previously on the overview. We can get a bit of trends and insights into the usage of this app. So how many users are using it? How many IPs are using it? The traffic, a bit of a trend here, and top entities that might be using it, such as machines or user accounts. If I want to, I can dig a lot deeper. I can say click onto the users here, and I can look at the individual usage for these users. Now in this case, these are all just demo accounts, so they're not really representative of what it would really look like. But we can see here, this user has 8 megabytes of traffic, 1 transaction, 5, 7. We can get some general usage trends, when it was first seen, the total active users, the total IP addresses, and total devices. And we can see that trend on a day-by-day basis. Downloads, devices, any rankings. Bit of an insight into how this app's being used in our environment to kind of feed the decision we might make if we want to allow or block this. We can dig into the IP addresses, dig into devices, any alerts associated with it, which we'll get into later. And with any of these things, we can export them into an Excel spreadsheet. Now, if I go back to Discovered Apps here, I have this app here that we've just looked at, and maybe I don't want to allow this. So I could say unsanction it, which means I don't want this in the environment. I want this to be blocked. Now, if we're using Defender for Endpoint and have that integrated, we can automatically ban this app on Defender for Endpoint's devices. If we're not, what we might have to do if we have, say, a log collector, or we're using a firewall to collect that log data, is go up to Actions here, and we can generate a block script right here. And what we can then do with this block script is select our specific appliance to apply this block script to, which means it would then be blocked on these appliances depending how many apps we have unsanctioned. So in this case, I only have one app unsanctioned, but if we had multiple, we could block it on that as well. And this can all be filtered by the continuous reports that we have here. So this is, in this case, Defender for Endpoint devices, that data, but we could also do this by various log sources as well. Likewise, when we're discovering apps, we can discover resources. So if they have any maybe AWS buckets or Azure resources or anything like that, we can discover that as well and look into that here. IP addresses have been discovered. So do we recognize these IP addresses? The users that have been discovered. So we can ensure that we're reporting the correct data and getting what we want, as well as devices. And we can select specific devices if we like, IP addresses, and again, we can dig into the individual activity of, in this case, the device. This demonstrates how it integrates with Defender for Endpoint, because we're getting also the device risk level, and we can also view this device in Defender for Endpoint. Likewise, if it's an IP address, we can click into that IP address and get a bit more insight, any discovered apps, any user history, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of tools we can use to further investigate and further dig down into these elements. Now, this Shadow IT discovery tool, Cloud Discovery, what is this is using is a catalogue of almost 25,000 apps that Microsoft has assessed and put into this product. And that is found here in the Cloud App Catalogue. So not only can we discover apps that are in our environment that we've detected through log data, we can also just look for apps in general. So if we go discovered apps, we're just going to see the ones that have been detected by virtue of log data, what we've uploaded in this case from Defender for Endpoint or our firewall, and we can filter that by a category such as collaboration, security, and we can filter even further if we like. The Cloud App Catalog is showing us all the apps that Microsoft has assessed as part of this product. So you can see here the categories down here: IT services, productivity, marketing, security, CRM, and we can drill down in each of these categories and look at the apps that have been found. An example of the use case here is that maybe you're looking to implement a new application into the environment. You might want to assess it for various compliance standards first, in which case we have this here. We can search for the application and we can find it. So an example, I have Salesforce IQ here. I can click onto that. It's not in my environment, but I might be thinking about it. So I can get some general risk data about this app, security, compliance, legal, etc. Drill down even further if we like. And again, if we wanted to, we could preemptively tag this as a sanctioned or unsanctioned application. Additionally, when we're looking for this Cloud App Catalog, we could filter it by, say, the compliance risk factors, or the security risk factors, or the risk score in general. So I could say, I only want to find apps for CRM that have at least a 9 rating. I want to find the safest stuff there is. And also, maybe I really care about ISO 3402. Am I going to find app? I have. So if we have specific things in mind that we care about, we can filter to find apps that match that requirement. Additionally, we have some advanced filtering. When we have advanced filtering, we can add a lot more in terms of filters. Legal risk factor, security risk factor, app tags potentially, and allows us to shape our own queries. So that's the kind of Cloud App Discovery side of things, where we're looking at Shadow IT. We have our discovered apps here. We have the dashboard here. And if we don't want an app in our environment, we can unsanction it, generate a block script, and put that on our appliance. If we have Defender for Endpoint, even better, it'll automatically block those applications on endpoint devices using Defender for Endpoint. It's as simple as finding the app and clicking unsanctioned here. The next part will be actually looking at and investigating the activity in our cloud apps, and that's found here under the Investigate tab. So the first thing we're going to get is we're going to get an all-up activity log. So for my environment here, this is mainly Microsoft stuff. I've not got any third-party apps connected. You can see here, if I go to app, it's just Microsoft stuff here. And it's giving me all the logs from these apps, commands being run, logons, single sign-on, that kind of thing. But what we can do is we can actually begin to filter this. So maybe we look for specific administrative activity. Maybe we're looking for specific IP addresses. So we can begin to really filter down this activity log, and we can use those filters to create policies that will generate alerts. Now we'll go into those policies in just a moment after this, but essentially what we can do is we can craft our own queries here, such as, I want administrative activity to equal true, and maybe I want it to come from a device that is not Intune compliant. Now that's just a very, very brief example. In this case, I created a query where it's an administrative activity that's performed on a device that does not equal Intune compliant. What I could then do is create a new policy from search, and I could then create an activity policy. Getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but essentially allows us to alert whenever that happens and take response action. We'll go into the actual policies in its own regard. Now this is just Microsoft apps. Additionally, if you have Defender for Identity, which is the solution for protecting Active Directory, you'd also be able to see Active Directory logs here. Now, this will populate with third-party log data. If we go to connected apps here, we can see the various apps that we can actually connect to this solution and start populating that log data, begin monitoring it, and begin protecting. There's AWS, there's Box, there's WebEx, there's Dropbox, ServiceNow, Slack. You can even suggest more for the development team to look at. When you connect an app to Defender for Cloud Apps, you will then see this activity log begin to populate with log data from that app. And then we can begin to form queries for that app on itself or across multiple apps. Say selecting multiple apps here, we could do it across vendors. So this is where we begin to monitor these applications for potentially suspicious activity, such as maybe mass file downloads across apps, or maybe suspicious activity in general. But generally speaking, it's a good solution to monitor those third-party apps in a multi-cloud environment. In addition to the activity log, we can also look at files. We can look at all the files that have been discovered in these applications, not just Microsoft, and begin to craft queries on them as well. So if I enable the advanced filters here, which we don't need to, I could say look for files where the access level equals public, or public with a link if anyone has a link, or external, internal, private. So maybe I'm really concerned about public internet accessible files. I might want to be searching for that, and in which case I can actually save these queries as I craft them, and then refer to them later if I like. So we have, see here, multiple queries here. There's also a suggested query. And again, in this case, the app here is only Microsoft solutions. We can filter by these apps, but as we begin to add in potentially third-party applications such as Dropbox or Google or Box, we can also begin to monitor files in those environments as well. And we get a whole host of filters we can use, such as collaborators, extensions, the file name if it's in trash, the owner if it's quarantined, or even the sensitivity label if we're using Microsoft compliance solutions. Now additionally, we also get user and accounts. We can look at all the users and accounts that have been discovered in this environment. We can drill down into each of these. We can click into a user account and get a bit of detail about this user, such as their identifiers, so in this case, this user's email address, but also their user ID potentially, and also the apps they're being using. What we can also go to is a dedicated user page, which will give us a lot more information about this user and allow us to investigate any suspicious activity being conducted by this user. So in this case, it will give us an investigation priority score for this user. It means they're pretty safe, but if not, we might want to say, look at their activities, look at any alerts associated with them, look at their owned files, view any files that have actually been shared with this user. And if we want to take some response action, we could confirm the user compromised, which will work with Azure AD P2's identity protection. We can require them to sign in again, suspend them, or look at their account settings and app, in which case this will take us to another portal for Azure AD to look at these user settings in Azure AD. But in the case of a user that's maybe a bit more suspicious, we'd have a bit more things to look at here, such as any activities that have contributed to a score. There is a security configuration tab here. So this is where if you're using Azure, AWS, GCP, you'll be able to connect these environments to this solution and monitor the security configuration of these clouds, these public clouds, to take improvement actions there. So you can see here, there's nothing here right now, but for GCP, it could potentially surface if we've connected it. Security recommendations for GCP, security recommendations for AWS, and Azure, using the various built-in solutions for security found within those cloud products. And we also have regulatory compliance. If you're using AWS or GCP, we have some regulatory compliance items as well. And just finally, we have Oauth Applications. Now, what this allows us to do is whenever a user, say, consents an application, sometimes those applications might request too many permissions, in which case we can look at all the applications that have been consented to in our environment and who they've been authorized by, and if they're maybe requesting too excessive permissions, the permission level. So in this case, I have this product here, which is a demo product, but I could click into this and I could see the publisher, the app ID, the consent activities and the activity log, so I can find who's actually consented to it and when. But we can also see the permissions. It's requesting a whole host of permissions, 33 here, view all user groups, have full access to files, read and write directory data. So there's a lot of permissions here. Now, if we saw this in maybe a more less obvious application, not just this demo one, we might think that's a bit risky and we might want to unsanction that and not allow that in our environment. We can get a bit of insight into it, so we can see the community use. It's rare. Community use being how often it's seen across environments, so it's not used very often. We can see any app activities in the activity log if we like, and then we can take some action and we can ban it, which means it won't be able to consent to it again by our users, or we can allow it. Additionally, we could report it if we think something's not right. And again, like all of the investigation tabs here, we can apply queries here, so we can look at the app, filter for different users, filter for an app state if it's banned or approved, look for the community use, so maybe we want to look at rare applications, and maybe we want to look for specific permissions that have been requested, or a high permission level. So really with this Oauth app page here, we're really just looking at apps that potentially our users are just approving and granting consent to whenever we see that requires consent page. And maybe occasionally we might see an app that's not what it seems. It might be malicious, since attackers are thinking of new ways all the time to get into our environments, and applications are surely one of them. So we might want to keep an eye on here, and again we can create policies here to be alerted when these things happen. Now, speaking about policies, let's have a look at the policies. Since it's all great having all this log data here, but what we want to really do is create alerts based on this log data, so we are told when something happens, and even better, impose an automated response when that happens. So if I go to policies here, I have quite a few policies. Threat detection, information protection, conditional access, and shadow IT, and also have this all policies tab here. But let's work through some of these and look at the kind of things that these policies will be looking for and how it can help us keep our environment a bit more secure. So if I go to Shadow IT, I've got two policies created here already, anomalies mainly, or data exfiltration, but we can create a few policies. Mainly we can create an app protect discovery policy, which is alerting us when specific apps have been discovered, or even when anomalies have been discovered. So if I go to app discovery policy here, the best way to describe this is to look at some of the templates. So this can be a new popular app has been discovered, or a new high volume app, a new risky app, or various categories of apps being discovered. So I could say here, new risky app discovered. What's this going to do is, gives me a description as a pre-built template, alert when new apps are discovered with a risk score lower than 6, and that are used by more than 50 users. Now, naturally, we can change all this. I have the risk score here, I can put this up or down. Additionally, I can add additional filters to look for this to be a prerequisite for an alert being triggered, such as a category, or additional risk factors such as compliance or legal. Additionally, I can apply this to specific continuous reports if I like, example being maybe a firewall log data, but not my Defender for Endpoint log data. We can add our filters here, so daily traffic greater than 50 megabytes, number of users greater than, we have a few more here, downloaded data, uploaded data, number of transactions. So this is in this policy that's kind of pre-templated for us. We're really looking at, in this case, when an application's been discovered, that it's not only risky, it's actually being used. Now this will vary on a the size of our organization. So we might say more like 10 or 20. And then we can create an alert. It will create an alert when those filters are matched. When that's discovered in our log data, it will generate an alert. We can send that alert as an email, as a text message, and we can even set a daily alert limit policy per policy, so we're not getting spammed continuously. And there's even an integration with Power Automate to select specific playbooks to further automate response actions. And once we've done that, we can then take some governance actions. So this could be immediately tagging the app as unsanctioned. And we know if we're using something like Defender for Endpoint, that will immediately block it on endpoint devices. Or we can sanction it, monitor it, or tag it with a custom tag. Now that's the shadow IT. What we also have is information protection. So we have file policies that are intended to protect sensitive data in the cloud. These examples will be things like files shared with unauthorized domains, files containing PII detected in the cloud, or even files detected that have been shared with a personal email address. So I can click on this, it'll pre-populate the template, and now we're looking for files that have actually been shared with a personal email address. So we can see how this begins to form this policy here. It's giving us this filter here, the collaborators, any from domain that contains these email domains, which are predominantly personal domains. We have Gmail, we have Yahoo, we can add more if we like. And of course, we don't just have to use these templates. We do have these filters in general that we can use, that we can craft our own policies from, such as match policy and trash, etc. A lot more specific to the different policy type that you're creating. And we can apply this to all files. We can exclude folders or select specific folders. We can select different user groups that will be affected by this policy. And we can even apply an inspection method. Now what we're doing when we apply an inspection method to a file policy is we're saying that we want to find not only files shared with a personal email address, we want to find specific sensitive data potentially. Now there's different inspection methods you can use for this. There's the built-in DLP, or there's the data classification service. Built-in DLP is just predominantly what's within Defender for Cloud Apps anyway. So we can say include files that match a preset expression, and that can be credit card numbers, it can be driver's license numbers, home addresses. So there's not many here. It can also be a custom expression if we like. The more recommended method is the data classification service. The data classification service is what is used across Microsoft solutions. So that's your information protection labels, your compliance solutions from Microsoft. That's what they'll use. So it allows us to have a consistent approach to the classification of our sensitive data across multiple cloud apps and third-party cloud apps. So we can say look for a sensitive information type, an exact data match, a fingerprint, or a trainable classifier. Now these last three being a bit more niche towards compliance offerings, but for the sensitive information type, we could say have all this sensitive information type here. We can filter it by financial, medical, privacy, GDPR, or even just search. So say credit. So I have credit card here. I could say this credit card here, press done, and I'm now going to be looking for, if we summarize again, emails that have been sent to a personal domain that also contain a credit card number. We have some advanced settings here, so we can specify the match accuracy, so min, max, and also the instance count. So what's the minimum instance count that's required for this to trigger this alert? We'll keep it as 1, but if we say maybe we want a bit more substantial leak, we might have a different alert created for that. And then when it is generated, we can unmask the last 4 characters of that match if we like, or keep it completely obscured entirely. Again, we can create an alert, but this time we have some response actions that we can take. So these governance actions. So when this alert is triggered, for those files we could say put in trash, remove a collaborator, apply sensitivity label, notify specific users. We can do the exact same for SharePoint Online. So we have different remediation actions that we can take, such as putting in an admin quarantine here, which is just a SharePoint folder specified by an admin, or removing external users, making it private, etc. Now this is just the Microsoft stuff, but if we had, say, Box, Dropbox, or other solutions connected here, we'd also have the response actions for those products linked here as well. And then finally, before we get on to the next one, is threat detection policies. This is, again, like we went through on the kind of overview. This is when we're looking for potential attacks or anomalous behavior that we might not want going on in our environment. We can see some that have been created already: suspicious inbox manipulation rules, risky sign-ins, risky Oauth apps, impossible travel. That's the kind of stuff that this policy is looking for. And of course, we can create our own. So we can create an activity policy or an Oauth policy. So if we go to activity policy, let's look at some of the templates. This can be things like mass download by a single user, or log on from a risky IP, potential ransomware activity, mass deletion or external users added in Teams. So if I say I want to look for a mass deletion in Teams, that's going to look for a repeated activity that repeats 50 times within a minute in a single app. And this can be activity type. So we're looking for a specific activity type equals team deleted. And the app equals Microsoft Teams. And again, for all these policies, this one's no different. We can add more filters or even craft our own custom policy if we like, based on these filters. So administrative activities, applied actions, devices, IP addresses, or even this potential malware activity or impersonated activity is true. So it allows us to really utilize the anomaly detection engines within this product to detect potential suspicious behavior in our cloud products. Then we generate an alert, and we have some governance actions we can take. We have some governance actions we can take across all apps. So notifying specific users, so notify the user, in which case we put a custom notification message, notify additional users, suspend users, require them to sign in again. You get the idea. And if this was, say, an environment that had Dropbox, more applications connected, again, we can take those response actions there. Now this is kind of high level overview. I've not went through every single policy here. There are more, specifically Oauth and other things there. But what I want to now touch on is conditional access here. Now you might think this is a bit familiar because you might have been aware of conditional access in Azure Active Directory P1. It's connected to that. What this is conditional access app control. What this allows us to do is for certain sessions, certain user sessions that meet a certain requirement or threshold, we can instead launch their cloud application through a browser in a reverse proxy architecture that allows us to monitor their session and block specific activities taking place in their session. Now the first thing we need to do for this policy to work is go to the Azure Active Directory policy and create a conditional access policy that will apply. So I'll go there. This is Azure AD Admin Center. We'll go to Azure AD and then we'll go down here to security and then conditional access. Because what you'll see is I've created a conditional access policy specifically for conditional access app control in Defender for Cloud Apps, which is here. Now we won't go through all of what conditional access is. If you're not sure what that is, feel free to reach out to myself after this webinar and we can take you through that. But essentially what we're saying is we want to say all users who are using Office 365 to have a session control applied, which is conditional access app control, and it's using a custom policy that we'll create in the Defender for Cloud Apps portal. Additionally, we could just block downloads and monitor only, which would then, for monitor substance, surface that data in the activity log, the other one blocking downloads. Now, if I go back to Defender for Cloud Apps portal, once we've created that policy in Azure Active Directory, we can then create a policy here in conditional access. Mainly what we're doing is a session policy. There is an access policy. An access policy will essentially block users from using the desktop versions of applications and force them to use a browser. So the access policy we can say device does not equal, say, compliant here, and we're simply going to block. And this will apply to, in this case, usually it's the actual desktop applications. So what we could just say is the client app, mobile and browser, and we're going to block that and force them to go to the browser if they meet certain prerequisites here. Because what we really want to think about is creating a session policy. Now, a session policy is where we can impose real-time monitoring and real-time control over a user session based on the prerequisites that we set here. So there are some templates. So this can be blocking upload of potential malware, blocking download of potential malware, blocking sending a message based on real-time inspection, blocking cut, copy and paste. These are the kind of things that we can enforce here. Because what we're essentially doing with this policy is we're forcing the user to go through a reverse proxy architecture where any action that takes place first has to go through Defender for Cloud Apps. Now, I'll show you one that I've created already, which is designed to block copy and paste. It's a bit more mundane, but we have some different actions we can take if we like. So in this case, I'm setting the control type, which can be block activities, but we can also monitor or control file download and upload. For file download and upload, use cases there being prevent the user uploading a document that isn't labeled, or preventing downloading of labeled document. Block activities, we're essentially saying the activity type equals any of these, cut, copy, paste, print, send message, and we can then say block down here. Additionally, we can be a bit more nuanced. We can add additional filters onto this. So is there any other requirements that we'll need to actually block those activities? It could be that we say the user is a specific user, or the specific activity type, specific app, or maybe the device tag does not equal Intune compliant, as an example. Again, we're not going to go through each and every single one of these filters, but what I'm demonstrating to you is how you can craft your own policies here. You don't just have to use the preset templates, and you can customize these to your desire. Additionally, we can do these blocking actions based on content inspection. So we could again look at these preset expressions such as a credit card number, a Swift code, or driver's license, and block cut, copy, paste, and send item based on if they actually contain any of these preset expressions. I won't do that. And then we can say block. We could test, in which case it will monitor and surface those activities in the log and have an alert anyway, or block will block them anyway. And we can say always apply the action even if data cannot be scanned. Now, what does that actually look like once that policy is applied? So what I'll do is I'll go to Office, I'll go to Teams, and what we will see is that Teams will now be monitored. We'll get this pop up here. Now we can optionally disable this surfacing, but we'll say access to Teams is being monitored, because if we remember, if we go back to my Azure Active Directory conditional access policy, this is applied to Office 365, what includes Teams. So I can continue on to Microsoft Teams. Give that a second to load. And we're here for Teams. Doesn't look any different. The only thing that's changed is if we look up here, is the URL is teams.microsoft.com.mcas.ms. So it's sending this user session through a reverse proxy that's monitored and controlled. So if we go maybe dig into one of these options here, say try and copy this, we'll get a pop-up saying action blocked. It's blocked by our organization security policy. Because if we go back to the policy, we can see one of the things that we blocked is cut, copy and paste. Now that's just a kind of basic example. This could be block copying, pasting of sensitive information, so we can actually apply real-time session monitoring, or block downloading of documents, or even block sending of documents that aren't labeled. If we go back to look at some of those templates that we saw previously, we can see how that begins to apply. So if we go to a session policy here, go to the policy template, we could say block sending of messages based on real-time content inspection. If I do that, I can say I want the preset expression to be a credit card number. So in which case, I'm blocking an activity of sending an item if it has a credit card number in it. And we can do that based on many things. It can be blocking uploads, blocking downloads, blocking cut, copy and paste. And it doesn't have to be a preset expression. It can be our own custom expression if we like as well. Now again, when we create any of these policies here, and before I do, there is a templates view, so you can look at all up every single template available and filter that if you like. But when we create these policies, what we're worried about more is the alerts. So not only can we set up the alerts to send emails and text messages, we will have this alert view here, of course, that we can look at ourselves. So we can see all the alerts have been generated. In fact, you can see the one that's just been generated just now based on something I just did. Block, copy and paste. So if we click into that, we can get a bit more detail about this alert and what's happened for this alert to be generated in the first place. So we can see it's a low severity. The activity log, so we can see the activity log item, which is cut, copy and item. So we can click into that activity log item. Bit of a description. The source is session control. The user is mod administrator. And various information about the location, the IP address of what's happened for this alert to surface on the activity log. So that's some general information. We can also get some user information. So the user himself, any open alerts, how many activities, have they connected from multiple countries, so 2 countries, 4 ISPs, and their activity over time, and some frequent locations. And the exact same insights for the IP address. Now if we want to do some digger deeping, we can look into the activity log for activities of the same type, activities of the same user, same IP, same country, and same time frame, which is 48 hours. So the activity log is really powerful. You can really dig deep into specific activities and even find similar activities from the same user and various other identifiers. We also have the user here. Again, you can click into this user, get some more insights about their accounts, and even go to the dedicated user page to conduct a more thorough investigation into the specific user and their activities. So if I go to this user, we can see here it's a bit different now. This user has an investigation priority score of 42. That's based on alerts mainly, but also some risky activities. And what's that user score compared to the organization? 100%, so not doing too great. And the user score for the last 2 weeks. And then we can see the activities that happened here that contribute to that. So broke sharing inheritance, they logged on potentially from a suspicious area. Yep, infrequent country. So this allows us to dig into that user. And again, maybe we want to dig in a bit more, view the related activity, view any governance for the governance logs. There is a governance log for admin actions, any account settings, any owned files, any alerts, etc. So the alerts also allow us to really dig deep into the specific users, IP addresses, devices, whole host of things. We get these insights here. So the alerts, while you might get them an email and you might just want the governance action to take place, it's definitely useful to have a look here as well. So that's a kind of quick summary, overview of Defender for Cloud Apps. Again, like all of Microsoft security, it's a bigger product, but there's a few things we can touch on very quickly to kind of look at how this further integrates. First, let's have a look quickly at the settings. So there is some settings here. We can set organizational settings, mail settings such as the email design when somebody receives an alert. We can change the score metrics if we like for more importance or less importance for different score metrics such as when they were founded, different security things. This is really looking at the security of our apps, but we can change the weighting of those calculations if we like. We can enable anonymization, so we can anonymize users' usernames and device names based on log data if we like. That's optional. And if we do that, we can enable a system where we effectively have to justify removing anonymization. There is the various integrations we have, so Defender for Identity. This will integrate with Defender for Identity and begin surfacing activity logs from on-prem AD into the activity log here. We do have integration with Azure AD Identity Protection to get alerts surfaced here from that product. We do have Microsoft Information Protection, so we can automatically scan new files for sensitivity labels, and we can only scan files based on for sensitivity labels from this tenant. The only last thing I want to kind of touch on is how this integrates with Microsoft Compliance's data loss prevention. So if I go to the portal here, and we go to the compliance portal, once we have it loaded, we can see how this integrates with data loss prevention. Data loss prevention being the compliance offering from Microsoft from preventing the accidental leakage of data from our environment. Because what we can actually do is we can use the applications integrated with Defender for Cloud Apps and actually factor them into data loss prevention policies. Now, this is a bit of a new portal, and we've not really touched this, so ignore mostly what you see here. But what we're worried about here is data loss prevention. Because if we create a policy for data loss prevention, one of the areas we can apply it to, and I'm going to quickly fire through this, so don't really worry too much about this right now, because we will make a webinar for this, is we can actually apply this to Defender for Cloud Apps down here. So I'll turn off the rest of these areas here and show you what that actually looks like. Because what we have is when, in this case, sensitive information is being detected accidental leakage, we can take actions in third-party apps, such as Box, G Suite, Cisco, WebEx, Salesforce. So we can actually start in our data loss prevention policies using Defender for Cloud Apps to begin to ensure that sensitive data in our third-party apps is also protected from data leakage by taking response action in those third-party apps. Now that's just a really quick touch on that really, and we don't really want to go into too much detail and kind of get ahead of ourselves, but it's just another example how Defender for Cloud Apps is a really good product for integrating across third parties, and it's not just for Microsoft solutions. It will extend the capability of other solutions, such as data loss prevention, to support third parties. So that's the technical demo. Again, intention is really to have a kind of quick overview of the product so you can see what it looks like, see what it does, how some bits are set up, and then you can go and do some research yourself if you're interested, or reach out to us and we can support you in delivering this solution with your customers. What I'll do now is I'll hop back to the slides and we'll continue there. So that's been the kind of webinar for today. The one thing I do want to touch on is just how we can help you with these solutions, Microsoft Security, but also Microsoft Cloud in general, so we can give you one-on-one training for you and your team to understand these products better, point you to the right resources if required, get in touch. We can support pre-sale, so providing demonstrations of the solution to your customers if they're interested in the product, or maybe you want to proactively drive this product with your customers. We can absolutely support you in providing those demos to your customers and answering their questions. And as a caveat to that as well, we can help you with delivery with our professional services team. And that is us. That is the last webinar of the security series. Next, we'll be looking something towards more Microsoft compliance focus, so kind of stay tuned for that. And thank you for coming today, and thank you for coming to the previous webinars if you have as well. Have a good day. Thank you.